that in the chat. And if you have any questions, you can also note that in the chat. Now I'm going to go ahead and toss it to Council President Evan Glass for opening remarks, and then we'll open it up for questions. Council President Glass, to you.
Thank you very much, Jordan, and thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon. It's been a pretty tough week for residents of Montgomery County and across the region. All eyes are on Israel and Gaza, and many people are upset, they're angry, and they're scared. The eyes of the world are watching the loss of life, the destruction, the pain. We are all feeling a lot of emotions right now, which is why it is extremely important to remember that Montgomery County is one of the most diverse places in this entire country. And we want to make sure that everyone deserves to feel safe, seen, and welcome here. That is why our county has opened our security grant program for houses of worship and for other nonprofit organizations just last week. These security grants are designed to ensure that everyone in our community feels safe. The $900,000 program will allow for faith-based institutions to apply for grants that can be used for security. Each organization can apply for up to $20,000 in grants that will be dispersed in a timely manner. And as we watch what is happening in the Middle East, we cannot allow for our religious and political views to turn into hate. We cannot and should not hate our neighbor. Hate has no home here in Montgomery County, and we have to remember that. I want to turn to an item that was just discussed moments ago within the hour, and that is the discussion on White's Ferry that happened at the Transportation and Environment Community. For those of you who don't know the history of White's Ferry, you know that it has been closed since 2020, but White's Ferry was first established in 1786 and has served as a critical transportation channel between Montgomery County and Loudoun, Virginia for centuries. And it has sustained our local economies on both sides of the Potomac River. And there has been a longstanding legal battle between the two property owners in Maryland and Virginia. And this morning's Transportation and Environment Committee was moving us in a step in the right direction, because it was the first time that both property owners have been in the same place to publicly discuss this issue. We heard from not only the property owners, but the elected leadership in Poolesville, members of our General Assembly about the work that they are doing as well. But here's the bottom line. The closure of White's Ferry has resulted in a loss of between $9 and $25 million. And it has also caused 9 million additional vehicular miles from being added to our roadways. And so we need to resolve this issue immediately. It's been festering for years, but today's conversation put it all on the table. And we are going to be following up with the county executives team, with the Maryland Secretary of Transportation, and with our counterparts on the Virginia side to determine how we can work out an agreement between two disputing private landholders. And that's an important thing to keep in mind. I am hopeful that based on today's conversation, a compromise can be achieved. The property owners need to put their own financial interests aside and think about the needs of our region and the families and economies that have been impacted and will continue to be impacted until White's Ferry opens. An issue that I want to bring to your attention for tomorrow that will be discussed at the full council, we are going to be receiving a briefing from our Office of Human Resources. And the briefing is going to talk about two things. One, we're going to get an update on the vacancy rate for county jobs. This was a central component of our last budget discussions, recognizing that we had a high vacancy rate and we wanted to put resources into filling jobs here in Montgomery County so that every resident and business owner has access to the programs that they need. And that our quality of life is maintained. But there's also a second aspect of tomorrow's conversation, and that is a pay equity report that will be provided to us. And this pay equity report is required by law from the passage of the Pay Equity Act that was passed in 2019, and that I actually introduced. The gender pay gap has long-term implications that hurt women, especially women of color. We know that here in the state of Maryland, women get paid less than their male counterparts. Black women get paid 69 cents for every dollar a man makes, and Latina women get paid about 48 cents for every dollar a man makes. And when I first joined the council in 2018, my office discovered that we had huge gaps here in county government, especially or particularly within the Department of Health and Human Services, where there was a $31,000 gap between a male employee and 12 female employees who were all at the same pay grade. 13 individuals who all had the same pay grade, and the man made $31,000 more than the lowest paid woman. Unconscionable. And within the Department of Transportation, we found that wage gaps also existed between $8,000 and $28,000 for people serving in a specific pay grade, which happened to be Transportation Manager 3. And so that's why I introduced the Pay Equity Act in 2019. And the Pay Equity Act prohibits Montgomery County government from requesting the salary history from a job applicant who wants to work for Montgomery County, because we know if someone is paid lower at another job and they are paid less because of their gender or race, then requiring someone to provide a pay stub to justify future pay only perpetuates the wage gap that exists. So tomorrow's briefing, we're going to get an update on the first biannual gender pay report. And those findings will be made public. And I'll share some of that with you right now. The report will show that base salaries in county government, the wage gap for base salaries in county government has been closed. In fact, women in county government are now making 2 cents more per dollar versus their male counterparts in base salaries. However, there is some more work to do because that's for base salaries. And as we look at more senior employees that have been here and have had year over year salary adjustments, there is a wage gap that persists there. And that gap is 10 cents. Women are making 90 cents per dollar for every dollar a man makes. But to put it in perspective, the statewide gap is 86 cents. But as we bring more people on board, get them into county government and get them at the same pay scale, at the same salary, that will disappear. And then last thing I also just want to share with you before opening it up for questions. Tomorrow, there will be a public hearing on the legislation to eliminate tipped employees for restaurant workers. This bill will adjust the calculation for the minimum wage for tipped workers. It will phase out the tipped credit amount under the county's minimum wage law, and just generally change the county's minimum wage law to include restaurant workers. Tomorrow's public hearing will provide all of us with much needed community input on this legislation, because we want to hear from residents and people in the restaurant industry about how this will affect that industry and that sector. I encourage all residents who want to provide feedback to send us comments, either email or share with us in other ways as well. And after tomorrow's public hearing, in the coming weeks, there will be a joint Health and Human Services and Economic Development Committee work session to discuss this legislation. It is up to the chairs of those committees to pick a time for when they will receive this legislation for those work sessions. And with that, those are all the items I wanted to share with you, but I'm sure that you all have questions on your mind. So Jordan, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Council President Glass. Reporters, a friendly reminder, if you have any questions, please note that in the chat. I do have a few direct messages. Up first, we have Tom Fitzgerald from Fox 5 DC. Good afternoon, Tom.
Council President, thanks for doing the call. Two questions about White's Ferry. Do you have a partner in Loudoun County government?
I'm sorry, Tom, you're kind of breaking up a bit. Can you?
On this as well? If so, give us an update on the status of those talks.
So I didn't hear all of your question. You're in and out of service, Tom. But I think I know where you're going. You're asking about a partnership with Loudoun County, and Montgomery County has been doing everything we can to make sure that White's Ferry reopens. We have suggested buying the ferry. We have suggested using our governmental powers to take and utilize the land that is necessary to operate the ferry. Virginia has a difference of opinion about what they're willing to do. And so the most important thing to recognize is that this is a land dispute between two private landowners. And we in Montgomery County, recognizing that the dispute essentially rests across the Potomac River, we are doing everything we can to incentivize and encourage using our resources and our governmental ability. But the reason I organized today's conversation was for the two property owners to have this public conversation, to let everybody know where they're coming from and what they want out of these negotiations. And there were, we heard various things, but I remain hopeful that we can all work together to help the region, because right now, tens of millions of dollars are being lost in economic activity. Millions of miles are being added to our roadways, producing more carbon emissions. And so this is not good for our economy. This is not good for our environment. And we need to find a resolution ASAP.
I hope you can hear me. I just had one quick follow-up. Is it your preference or the council's president's preference for the property owners to resolve this themselves, or could eminent domain be used at some point here to force a solution?
So the property in question resides in Virginia, and it is not up for the government of Montgomery County to determine any use of governmental right in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I'll tell you on my own that if the problem were on the Montgomery County side here in Maryland, I would use eminent domain to support our community. But this property is not in Montgomery County. And so we have to work with our landowners. We have to work with the government of Loudoun County and the Commonwealth of Virginia to find a resolution that works for everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Up next, we have a question from Milagros Melendez with El Tiempo Latino. My colleague, Marcela Rodriguez, is going to assist in helping to ask this question. Marcela?
Thank you, Jordan. The first question for Council President Glass is Montgomery County Council taking steps to prevent more hate crimes in the midst of the war in Gaza? And this question comes after this horrific crime that happened in Illinois this weekend, where a 6-year-old Muslim boy was killed. In addition, the second question is when will the task force be publishing its recommendations? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. So right now, we want to make sure that everyone in Montgomery County feels welcome and safe, and that any political and religious disagreements that might exist remain points of debate, not points of hated and heated action against each other. We can disagree without being disagreeable. We can go to vigils, we can go to our houses of worship, and we can express our disagreement. But to see what is happening in other parts of the country or other parts of the world where people are being maimed or killed because of their disagreement, that's not how we do things here. We're better than that. That's why we have created the Anti-Hate Task Force, recognizing that some of these disagreements might have started millennia ago. But we have to continue doing everything we can to recognize our differences, but also celebrate our commonality. And so the Anti-Hate Task Force continues to meet. Just last week, as a matter of fact, just last week, the Muslim cohort met to share their recommendations. And we recognized the climate that we're in. Yet they were able to move forward with their work, sharing their emotions, but also recognizing that we have work to do here. And they put forward their recommendations. And all of the recommendations of the task force will be presented at the end of November. And they will be presented to the full council at the beginning of December. And now that, in addition to the $900,000 in security grants that will be provided to faith communities and other nonprofit organizations, these are the steps, the actionable steps that we are taking to make sure that everybody feels welcome and safe here in Montgomery County.
Great, thank you. I think those were all the questions from Milagros. Thank you, Marcella. Reporters, if you have any other questions, last minute questions, I don't see any in chat. You can go ahead and note that in the chat or raise your hand. Okay, we have Courtney Kahn with MoCo 360. Good afternoon, Courtney.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Councilmember Glass, for being here. I just wanted to ask about the ferry, if you have any timeline in mind for when you'd like the ferry to be reopened, or based on how the talks are going, if you have any predictions or estimations on when that'll be resolved.
The ferry's been closed for nearly 3 years, so we would like it open tomorrow if we could. Now, in our conversation at the committee, there were some glimmers of hope. The property owner, the ferry operator here in Montgomery County, Mr. Kuhn, increased the amount of money that he was willing to provide the property owner in Virginia, and suggested that he's willing to sell the ferry to Montgomery County to be the operator if that's what gets it back up and running. And the property owner in Virginia mentioned a few other suggestions that she would be amenable to. So we are going to shift this public conversation back into a private negotiation, but it's important to know where everyone's starting from, or at least where they are right now. For far too long, these conversations have all been private, and residents have asked me and asked members of our General Assembly and my colleagues about what's happening. And today's conversation is a marker to let everybody know where everybody stands. And from here, I'm very hopeful that we can make meaningful progress.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you, Courtney. Reporters, I don't see any last minute questions. Going once, going twice, 3 times. Okay, back to you, Council President Glass. Thank you.
Thank you again, everybody, for your questions and comments. There will be a lot of good discussion at tomorrow's council session, so I encourage you to follow that discussion. And again, as we watch world events on the other side of the globe, we want to make sure that everyone here in Montgomery County feels safe. Being one of the most diverse communities in the entire country is something to be celebrated, but it's also hard, and we have to listen to each other. And we have to make sure that everybody is heard and that everybody feels seen. And that is what we are all working toward, to make sure that the violence that is occurring in Israel and in Gaza does not happen here. We can disagree without being disagreeable. And that is something that I hope we all agree upon. So thank you all for being here this afternoon, and follow up if you have any questions. Take care.